I'm 88 years old, and I remember everything. Now, when I say everything, I don't mean I have a photographic memory or that I'm some sort of genius. No, I mean I remember the important things. I remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday. I remember conversations from last week. I remember the names of all my grandchildren, yes, even the little one who just started walking and whose name I used to always forget. I remember phone numbers, faces, books I read in my 20s. I remember the color of the dress my wife wore on our first date in 1961. But it wasn't always like this. In fact, for a while I thought I was losing my mind. At 70, things started to change. Slowly at first. A forgotten appointment here, a misplaced word there. I would walk into a room and forget why I went in. I'd open the fridge and just stare, unsure of what I was looking for. I'd reread the same page in a book 3 or 4 times and still not remember what it said. At first, I laughed it off. It's just age, I told myself. Everyone forgets sometimes. But deep down, I was scared. I had watched friends of mine drift into dementia, become shadows of who they once were. I wondered if I was next. Doctors ran tests. Nothing conclusive. Mild cognitive decline, they called it. Normal for your age. They gave me pamphlets and prescriptions. None of it helped. My mind felt like a radio stuck between stations, always fuzzy, always fading. But I'm not the kind of man to give up easily. I've always been a curious person. Even in my retirement, I never stopped reading, never stopped learning. So, I turned my curiosity toward memory. I started reading everything I could find, scientific journals, books on brain health, articles on neuroplasticity. I even attended a few lectures at the community center. That's when I stumbled upon something that changed my life. It wasn't a pill. It wasn't an app or a gadget. It wasn't some trendy brain game that promised to make me smarter in 10 minutes a day.
No.
It was something so simple, so old, so overlooked that most people wouldn't give it a second thought. A habit. A 3-minute habit. The technique was called focused recall. And though it sounds fancy, all it really means is this. Take 3 minutes each day to quietly recall one recent experience in as much detail as possible. I thought, that's it? Just remembering something? How is that going to help me? But I had nothing to lose. So, I tried it. Here's how it works. Every morning, before I do anything else, I sit in my favorite chair by the window. I close my eyes. I take a deep breath. And I think back to something that happened the day before. I choose one moment. It could be anything. A phone call with my daughter, a walk in the park, the taste of soup I had for lunch. Then I reconstruct that moment in my mind. Where was I? What was I wearing? What did I smell, hear, feel? I try to see it all in my mind's eye. After 3 minutes, I open my eyes and write down one sentence about the memory in a little notebook. The first few days were rough. I couldn't remember much. Everything was a blur. I'd sit there for 3 minutes and recall maybe 1 or 2 details. But I kept at it. Day after day, week after week. By the end of the second week, things started to change. I found myself remembering more during my sessions, more smells, more sounds, more textures. My dreams became more vivid. I started waking up with ideas and memories that hadn't crossed my mind in years. 3 months in, I was a different person. The fog had lifted. My thoughts were sharper, faster. I could hold conversations without losing track. I remembered jokes again. I remembered names. And not just from the day before, but from decades ago. I went back to the doctor. He ran another round of memory tests. The results were stunning. My performance had improved by over 40%. He looked at me with wide eyes and asked, "What did you do?" I told him, "I just started remembering to remember." Now, let me explain something important. This isn't some magical trick. There's real science behind why this works. When you deliberately recall a memory, especially one that's recent, you activate the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for learning and memory. You also engage the prefrontal cortex, which helps with focus and decision-making. These brain regions don't just sit there passively. When you use them regularly, they grow stronger, just like muscles. Modern neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. And one of the most effective ways to stimulate neuroplasticity is through active recall. Unlike passive review, like rereading something, active recall forces your brain to retrieve information without cues. That act of effortful retrieval strengthens the memory and reinforces the neural pathways involved. MRI scans show that focused recall increases activity in memory-related regions and boosts levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that acts like fertilizer for your brain cells. The more BDNF you produce, the more flexible and resilient your brain becomes. In fact, studies in Japan and Germany have used this technique with elderly patients suffering from mild cognitive impairment. In many cases, participants regained memory function, showed improved attention spans, and even regained confidence in daily tasks. Think about it. We go to the gym to exercise our bodies. Why wouldn't we take 3 minutes a day to exercise our minds? But that's not all I did. The 3-minute habit was the foundation, but I added a few other daily practices that supercharged my progress. And I want to share them with you because together, they turned my life around. First, I started walking. Every morning after my recall session, I go for a 20-minute walk. Nothing strenuous, just a stroll through the neighborhood. Walking increases blood flow to the brain, reduces inflammation, and enhances mood. It's one of the best things you can do for memory. Studies show that even light walking can reduce the risk of dementia by up to 30%. Second, I changed what I ate. I started eating more omega-3 rich foods, salmon, walnuts, chia seeds. I cut down on sugar and processed food. I added berries, green leafy vegetables, and olive oil to my diet. This isn't a diet plan, it's brain fuel. A healthy brain needs healthy fat, antioxidants, and vitamins. Third, I read aloud. Yes, out loud. Every day, I pick a short article or a chapter of a book and read it aloud for 10 minutes. Reading aloud improves verbal memory and stimulates auditory processing centers in the brain. It also slows you down and forces deeper engagement with the material. Fourth, I stopped using screens before bed.
No TV,
No phone.
no tablet.
I spend the last hour of my evening in low light, either journaling or listening to calm music. This improved my sleep dramatically, and deep sleep is essential for memory consolidation. Fifth, I started learning new things. I enrolled in a beginner's Italian course at 85. I didn't do it to become fluent. I did it to stretch my brain. Learning something new, especially a language or a musical instrument, activates large areas of the brain and encourages the formation of new neurons. These habits may sound simple, but together, they form a powerful system. And the cornerstone is still the 3-minute recall. People ask me all the time, is it too late for me? I say, it's never too late. I don't care if you're 55 or 95. The brain never stops learning. It never stops changing. But you have to give it the right input. Too many people assume that memory decline is inevitable. It's not. It's a choice, at least in part. Yes, genetics play a role. Yes, some forms of dementia are unavoidable. But for most of us, memory loss is a result of neglect, not destiny. Now, I don't just remember facts. I remember life. I remember laughter, colors, smells, feelings. I remember the way my wife looked at me when I danced with her in the living room last Christmas. I remember who I am. And so can you. Let's stop accepting memory loss as normal. Let's stop waiting for someone else to fix it. Let's take 3 minutes a day and change our lives. You don't need a doctor to start. You don't need an app. You just need a chair, a quiet space, and the willingness to try. If an old man like me can do it, so can you.
Start today.
Remember today. Because one day, you'll look back and realize, those 3 minutes changed everything.